I have worked in compliance archiving for 31 years, and in that time I have seen exactly two cases that caused me to stop what I was doing, set down my instruments, and sit very still with my hands flat on the desk. First involved a containment rating error that had gone undetected for 11 cycles. The second was the file of Alara Voss. I pulled her record on a Tuesday morning in late autumn, which is to say, it was the kind of morning that produces no sense of occasion whatsoever. Marathon has no windows in the archive wing. The light comes from overhead panels that do not change with the hour. I had two junior foresters with me, Peln and Tios, both in their first posting, both the kind of young that makes you feel the weight of your own years simply by standing nearby. We were conducting a routine audit of unclosed mortality records, which is exactly as tedious as it sounds. A death record is considered unclosed when the subject's biological cessation has not been formally confirmed and logged. These accumulate over time. Most are administrative oversights. A subject transferred between facilities, a record that crossed jurisdictions, a scan that never synced. You open the file, you find the cessation entry buried somewhere, you close it, you move on. Alara Voss appeared in our queue as case 7 Omega 441. The flag attached to her file was procedural, unclosed mortality record, human subject, original prognosis issued 42 standard years prior. That was the first thing that made me pause. 42 years is not a backlog. 42 years is a career. I told Peln to pull the holographic scan archive while I read the intake notes. The original record was thorough. I will give that to the physicians at the Verith Institute. They were careful people. The intake notes ran to 60 pages of dense clinical Verith script, and I read all of them that morning while the scan archive loaded. Alara Voss had arrived at the Institute as a research subject, category voluntary, at the age of what her species calls 38. She was in good physical condition by human standards, which the intake physician noted with some care, because what they had found inside her was not consistent with good condition at all. There was a mass. It had been growing, they estimated, approximately 2 years. By the time she arrived at the Institute, it had reached a size and location that the Verith physicians classified under their Stage 4 protocol, which is their terminal designation, not in the sense of serious or treatable with difficulty, terminal in the mathematical sense. The outcome prediction was not an estimate, it was a calculation. I have reviewed many Verith Institute files. Their mortality modeling is among the most precise in the 11 systems. They do not guess. They apply the known biological parameters of the subject species, the known growth rates of the pathology type, the known responses of the relevant organ systems, and they produce a figure. For Alara Voss, that figure was between 9 and 14 standard weeks. The lead physician had annotated this with a note that read, in translation, something close to the phrase, "The mathematics here is not in dispute." Peln had the scans up by the time I finished the intake notes. We looked at them together, the three of us, gathered around the holographic projector, in the way that you gather when you are not yet sure there is anything worth gathering for. The original scans were clear. The mass was exactly as described. The stage designation was not an error. If you had shown those images to any qualified physician in the 11 systems and asked them to give you a survival window, they would have told you the same thing the Verith physicians told her. What the file did not contain was a cessation record. Tios noticed it first and said very quietly that there must be a transfer record somewhere, that she must have been moved to another facility, and that facility had failed to close the file on their end. It was the reasonable conclusion. I told him to check. He checked. There was no transfer. There was no record of her departure from the Institute at all, at least not in the mortality context. There was a discharge record. Approximately 16 weeks after her arrival, 2 weeks past the outer edge of survival window, she had been discharged. The discharge was classified as inconclusive. The attending physician had noted that the subject had declined further intervention, and that follow-up monitoring had been recommended. I remember the quality of the silence in that room after I read that aloud. Peln asked me what inconclusive meant in this context. I told him it meant the physicians had not known what to write. The mass had not behaved as projected. The scans taken at week 12 showed growth that had slowed. The scans at week 15 showed growth that had, in the Veritas' precise and somewhat bewildered notation, ceased to follow the modeled trajectory. There was a note from the lead physician that said, in full, the subject's immune response data is outside the range of the current predictive model. We are revising the model. We recommend continued observation. And then, 2 pages later, a note from the subject herself submitted in writing that said she was going home. She went home. She was discharged. The file was flagged for follow-up that never came because, as best I can reconstruct the administrative history, no one at the Institute wanted to be the physician who closed the record incorrectly, and so no one closed it at all. And it sat for 42 years accumulating the particular dust that archive files accumulate when everyone involved has quietly decided that someone else will deal with it. The correction request that had triggered our audit had been filed 8 months ago. I looked at the submission details. It had been filed by the subject herself. Her name was still Alara Voss. She was 80 years of age by human reckoning, which is to say, she was the age that for her species is considered late but not extraordinary. The correction request was 2 sentences long. In translation it read, approximately, I understand. There is an outstanding mortality record attached to my identification number from my time at the Veritas Institute. I am attaching current biometric confirmation and would appreciate having it closed. She had attached her biometrics. I pulled them up. They were current. Her heart rate, blood pressure, neural activity, the standard array, all of it reading in the healthy range for a human of her age. She had also attached, apparently for completeness, her medical history from the intervening 42 years. The mass had not returned. There was a note from her own physician, back on whatever planet she lived on, that described her as, and I am translating this as accurately as I can, generally unremarkable in terms of health, a phrase which struck me as one of the most improbable things I had ever read in a clinical document. Peln asked me what we were supposed to do. Told him we were supposed to close the record. He asked how. I told him that was a fair question. What you do, technically, is you mark the prognosis as superseded. You log the current biometric confirmation. You note the date of the original prediction and the date of the correction filing, and you enter the interval in the duration field. I entered 42 years, 4 months, and 11 days. The system accepted it without comment. Systems do not experience what I was experiencing. Was something in the vicinity of the feeling you get when you have been looking at a structural diagram for a long time, and you suddenly, that one of the load-bearing elements you assumed was a constant is, in fact, a constant, and has apparently never been a constant, and the structure is standing anyway. I have written a great deal in the years since. The summary I produced on the Voss file has been cited in 7 subsequent Institute reviews, and the methodology paper I co-authored with Peln on predictive mortality modeling for non-Veritas species has, I am told, changed several protocols. But the part of that morning that I remember most clearly is not the scan archive, or the correction request, or the biometric confirmation. It is the moment after I closed the file. The 3 of us were still standing around the projector. The scans had gone dark. The room was very quiet. Tios's was looking at the space where the images had been. Peln had his hands in his pockets. I was thinking about the Veritas physician's note, the one that said the mathematics here is not in dispute. And I was thinking about how that physician had been correct in every particular, and how the mathematics had been exactly right, and how none of it had mattered at all. I filed my log entry at the end of the day. I wrote, in the summary field, the predictive model for this subject species requires a variable for which no current notation exists. I did not know what to call the variable. I still do not. But whatever it is, it does not appear in the intake scans, and it does not show up on the biological panels, and it was not included in the original calculation. And it has been 42 years, and the subject is alive, and she would like the record corrected.